الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ومولانا أبي القاسم محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين الغر الميامين ولعنة الدائمة الباقية على أعدائهم أجمعين من الآن إلى يوم الدين. أما بعد، فقد قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم: من كنت مولاه فعلي مولاه، اللهم وال من والاه وعاد من عاداه. Amma ba'ad. So today, inshallah, we will be talking about a really different topic, and that different topic concerns us in a different way. So today we will be talking about the example of TALOOT alayhi salatu wassalam. Now TALOOT alayhi salatu wassalam is who? TALOOT alayhi salatu wassalam was the successor of Prophet Musa alayhi salatu wassalam, right? And inshallah, I will tell you how would we connect with the example of with the example of TALOOT alayhi salatu wassalam with this thing. TALOOT alayhi salatu wassalam was who? Was the successor of Prophet Musa alayhi salam. Prophet Musa had a successor named Harun alayhi salam. Harun, you would have known, and we have a famous hadith of Hadith al-Manzila that says, "Oh Ali, you are like to me as Musa had Harun alayhi salatu wassalam," right? So just like Prophet Musa has Prophet Harun, likewise Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam had Amir al-Mu'mineen. But what happened is that, as per some of the historical notes, Prophet Harun alayhi salatu wassalam died in the time of Prophet Musa, right? So after that, Prophet Musa alayhi salatu wassalam had left TALOOT alayhi salatu wassalam as who? As someone who would be taking care of the matters of Bani Israel. So what happened was that Allah is giving an example of TALOOT alayhi salatu wassalam. So the story begins, and the story is mentioned in Surah Al-Baqarah. Now, how is it connected to the topic of the Imamat that we are going through? Now, just remember that Imamat, in the initial classes, we discussed the concept of the Imamah. We went through the logical proofs, we went through the concept of the Imamah in Sunni and Shia traditions, as well as that the Quranic proofs that we generally apply, and also the proof that the Sunni scholarship they bring over to prove that the Imamat is through Shura. We also went through that, and we gave our opinion, and we gave the correct understanding of it. Now we finally come into another discussion, and now we are talking about Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salatu wassalam specifically. Okay, so this is the discussion we're supposed to do. So the way we are combining this discussion is the taking the example in Quran, what Quran has given us as an example. We would take that example as our yardstick, and then we would see that who is more worthy of leadership, who is more worthy of this khilafah, who is more worthy of this imamah when you compare Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salatu wassalam with others. So how does it start? It starts that in Surah Al-Baqarah, verse number 246 and 247, that the Israelites, Banu Israel, they requested after the death of Musa alayhi salatu wasalam, they said to the Prophet that you should appoint us, right? You should appoint us a king, someone who would be leading us, so that we may fight in the way of Allah. So then the Prophet asked that, is it a possibility that if I make someone that you would not fight, even though the fighting will be prescribed on you and will be wajib upon you? They said, how can we not fight and we refuse to fight in the way of Allah when we have turned off our homes and are separated from our children? So anyways, the fighting was made wajib upon them. So what happened was that they were in a struggle and they had to fight in order to make sure that the oppressed people are being freed. And for that reason, they left their wives, they left their children, and they came to the Prophet and asked them to appoint someone so that that person can be their leader. Now, one of the question that this goes with the Shia understanding is that they didn't make a whole council. Important point. The Shia understanding is what the imams can only be appointed through this, but either by Allah or the Prophet. These Israelites, these Bani Israel, they didn't make a council. They didn't have a shura where they sit together and they appointed an imam by themselves. They went to the Prophet. So take this as an example, that even when the imam was made before, it wasn't appointed by the council or by the shura at that time. They used to go to the Nabi. They used to go to the Prophet of the time and ask them, oh, Prophet, make someone as our leader. All right, so this leader was made, and leader was who? TALOOT alayhi salatu wassalam. He's also called what? He's also called Saul in English, right? And then when he was made leader, now Banu Israel, they had problems with him. They said, how has he been entitled to become king over us? And then he said, we have a better right to kingship than he. We are rather close when it comes to the family terms. We are rather closer as compared to TALOOT alayhi salatu wassalam. And also another thing that they mention is that he's not even rich. He does not have the worldly means that generally the king has. How can you make him as a leader? And this is the answer I want you to concentrate, right? It says that Qala, the prophet at the time of Banu Israel, he said, Inna Allah astafahu alaykum, that Allah has selected him. Again, the Shia concept. Even if you are to make a king, a khalifa, it can only be made through Allah. Even Prophet is saying, he's not saying that I have made it as my personal choice. No. Inna Allah astafahu alaykum. Allah has made king. Allah has made him king over you. وَزَادَهُ بَسْطَةً فِي الْعِلْمِ وَالْجِسْمِ. And what? He's been given more. He has been blessed with two things. Two things that distinguish TALOOT alayhi salatu wassalam with everyone else. What are those two things? It's al-ilm, knowledge, wal-jism. Jism means what? Not a body, like body, this thing, obviously it means jism too. But jism refers here more than just like normal body. It means someone who is really strong, someone who is brave, someone who would not leave the battlefield when the fighting will become intense. Someone who would be there and supporting the army. So yeah, two things were being given as a yardstick: ilm, knowledge, and jism, the power, the strength. So now we have two things to judge Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salatu wassalam and the people that were against him. Who were the people that were against him? Obviously, first, second, and third caliph, right? Abu Bakr, Umar, and Uthman. These were against Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salatu wassalam. So one way you have Amir al-Mu'mineen, and the other way you have these three people. Now we would be in this lecture discussing that what are the things that distinguish Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salatu wassalam when it comes to the knowledge. Can the knowledge of Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salatu wassalam be compared to anyone else in this ummah? Anyone else in this ummah? Can we compare the knowledge of Amir al-Mu'mineen? Of course not. Of course not. Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salatu wassalam's knowledge, it cannot be even compared. But just for the sake of argument but just for the sake of the discussion, we have to use some loose terminologies, right? And one of those loose terminology includes saying that we have to compare the knowledge of Amir al-Mu'mineen with the knowledge of the other caliphs, right? It's just like comparing an ocean with not even a drop of water. With not even a drop of water, unfortunately, but we have to make comparisons in order to communicate our message in a better way. So making this comparison is as they say, is my majboori, something that I'm being compelled to do so that I can communicate my message in a better way. What are the references we have for the knowledge of Amir al-Mu'mineen? So many of them, so many of them. And you know what? Amir al-Mu'minin alayhi salatu wassalam was such a personality that the hadith is, and this hadith is where, remember, now I'll be giving the references and make sure that the references are being marked upon. You remember those references. The riwayah is from Amir al-Mu'minin alayhi salatu wassalam that says, Kuntu idha sa'altu Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam a'atani. Then when I used to ask Prophet, he used to give it to me. What a beautiful word. Sallallahu alayka Amir al-Mu'minin. Assalamu alayka Abul Hassan. That whenever I used to ask Prophet, he used to give it to me. Anything I would ask. And what do you think Amir al-Mu'minin used to ask? Obviously, Amir al-Mu'minin would not ask for the worldly gains. He is the one. He is the one that would, even if he would have bread with him, he would give the bread to who? To the poor people. And not only he would be giving the bread, but his whole family would take and will give all the khubz, the roti and the bread they have. Just for that night, they will give it to someone else. You know the famous example of Surah Al-Dahr? That 3 consecutive days, Amir al-Mu'minin alayhi salatu wassalam, Sayyida Fatima al-Zahra, Imam al-Hassan, Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, they gave whatever they had for the night. And they only would drink water and they would have a little bit of salt and they would sleep. This is our Mawla. This is our Imam. Sallallahu alayhi Amir al-Mu'mineen. Assalamu alayka Abul Hassan. So Prophet used to give Amir al-Mu'mineen whatever he wants. Whatever, what would he ask? Obviously, he would ask generally the things about the knowledge, about wisdom. وَإِذَا سَكَتُّ ابْتَدَأَنِي. And when I would be quiet and I wouldn't speak anything, Prophet would start the topic himself. Right? So this is Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam giving respect, giving honor, giving homage to whom? To Amir al-Mu'minin alayhi salatu wassalam. Imagine how close they used to be, that Amir al-Mu'minin would always be with Prophet, generally would always be with Prophet. And when he would be with the Prophet, and there are exceptional situations where he might not be, of course, there will be situations, but generally he would be with the Prophet. And at those moments, imagine how much knowledge would Amir al-Mu'minin would have gained from Prophet. Either Amir al-Mu'minin asking something, if Amir al-Mu'minin is not asking, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam would start the discussion and would quote some stuff to Amir al-Mu'minin. Likewise, we have a hadith which is in a lot of Sunni books, right? And it's from, the reference that I'm quoting is from Al-Mu'jam al-Kabir. Al-Mu'jam al-Kabir is a book that's written by Tabarani, right? Remember the word Tabarani is the writer. The book name is what? Al-Mu'jam al-Kabir. Al-Mu'jam al-Kabir, there is a discussion that's been going around between Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra and Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Whether the discussion is true or not, that's a separate topic. We can discuss this topic, inshallah, any other day. But the final words of the Prophet, when he is concluding the discussion, he says, لَقَدْ زَوَّجْتُكِهِ, that I have married you with Ali, alayhi salam. وَإِنَّهُ, and who is Amir al-Mu'minin? Now Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is giving the introduction to Sayyidah Fatima, that who is Amir al-Mu'minin alayhi salatu wassalam. Amir al-Mu'minin is what? لَأَوَّلُ أَصْحَابِ سِلْمًا. He is the first among my companions to proclaim Islam. You know, you have a lot of people that Fulan and Fulan, they accepted Islam before Amir al-Mu'minin. No, sir. It was only Amir al-Mu'minin alayhi salatu wassalam who proclaimed Islam. No, I'm not saying accepted Islam. He was already a Muslim. He was already a believer. He was Amir al-Mu'minin alayhi salatu wassalam. Obviously, he doesn't need to accept Islam. At that time, when Prophet announced his prophethood, it was Amir al-Mu'minin who was the first person to testify. And not only this, وَأَكْثَرُهُمْ عِلْمًا, and he is my companion who has the most knowledge. The most knowledgeable of all was who? Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salatu wassalam. وَأَعْظَمُهُمْ حِلْمًا. And when it comes to forbearance, when it comes to patience, there is no one that can match Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salatu wassalam in it. So you have Prophet describing Amir al-Mu'mineen with these high titles. That's another hadith, right? And then you have a famous hadith from Mustadrak and different other books. I'm quoting from Mustadrak al-Sahihayn and different other books that says قال رسول الله, and it's a famous hadith, right? And the Husaniya that you are sitting in, or the lecture that you're sitting is coming from where? Babul Ilm, right? Babul Ilm, right? So this Babul Ilm is what? It's the title of Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salatu wassalam. Prophet says, Ana Madinatul Ilm. I am the city of knowledge. Wa Aliyun Babuha. Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salatu wassalam is who? He is the gate of that knowledge, of that city of knowledge. Faman arad al-Madina. If anyone, see such a beautiful wording. If anyone wishes to come to the city, فَلْيَأْتِ الْبَابِ. Wow. Then he should come through the gate. He should not try to supersede the gate and go from other ways. He should always come through the gate, because that's the only way you can approach a city in a legal way. Imagine if you're going into a highway. Usually in highways, you would have a checkpoint before you would enter into a new city. Generally, it's not here in Canada, but let's suppose if you, even in Canada, if you're living around the Calgary place, right? When you go all the way towards Banff, right? There is a stopover there where you have to buy the ticket before you can go to the Banff National Park. I'm just giving you a Canadian example. But let's suppose you're living in Pakistan. So even if you're entering the city of Karachi, there is a toll plaza there, right? There's a toll plaza where you go and where you actually buy a ticket or do whatever, and you come through the gates of that city. Likewise, Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salatu wassalam is that gate of that city of knowledge. Babu Madinatul Ilm. Babul Ilm. Amir al-Mu'mineen is what? Babul Ilm. The gate, the doorstep. When you have to enter the city, you can only enter through that gate. This tells you the status of Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salatu wassalam. When there will be a difference of opinion, anything that will be coming from Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salatu wassalam will be hujjah, will be a binding proof, right? And this hadith is being quoted in so many traditions, and such an authentic hadith that there is no question about its authenticity. Likewise, we have different Sunni scholars, and this is what Baqallani has written in a book called Manaqibul A'immat al-Arba'a. He says it's been quoted from Abdullah ibn Abbas, okay? Hassan bin Ali, Imam Hassan, Zayd, Ammar ibn Yasir, Salman al-Farisi. These are companions, right? Jabir bin Abdullah, Abu Haytham bin Tayhan, Hudhayfa bin Yaman, Amr bin Hamak, Abu Sa'id al-Khudri. Abu Sa'id al-Khudri. These 10 companions, وَغَيْرُهُمْ مِنَ الصَّحَابَةِ, and more companions apart from them. رَضِيَ اللَّهُ عَنْهُمْ. What they used to say? إِنْ أَنَّهُمْ كَانَ يَقُولُونَ إِنَّ عَلِيٌّ خَيْرُ الْبَشَرِ. Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salatu wassalam is the best of human. وَخَيْرُ النَّاسِ, and is the best among the people. بَعْدَ رَسُولِ اللَّهِ, after Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. وَأَعْلَمُهُمْ, and he is the most knowledgeable of every person on the earth after Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. وَأَحَبُّهُمْ إِلَى رَسُولِ اللَّهِ, and he is the most beloved of all to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. So this was Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salatu wassalam. We have hadith, we have quotations from companions. that are really explicit on this topic. And there is no doubt that anyone can match the level of knowledge that Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salatu wassalam possessed. This is where we have Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salatu wassalam. He is at this top, right? And then you have other people. And it's so funny when people are comparing those people, those personalities with Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salatu wassalam. Let me give you an example of who? Let me give you the example of the first caliph, right? So we have here what? The topic of Kalala. Kalala is a topic and it is mentioned in Surah An-Nisa, verse number 176. So it says that Allah is saying, it mentions in the Quran, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, يَسْتَفْتُونَكَ قُلِ اللَّهُ يُفْتِيكُمْ فِي الْكَلَالَةِ. That, let me just quote you the ayah. People are asking you to pronounce a ruling concerning kalala, inheritance, from those who have left behind no linear heirs. So it's a matter regarding inheritance. And kalala is when someone has no legal heirs left, right? Someone who's really close, right? What is the ruling? So Allah pronounces you for the ruling, should a man die childless but have a sister, she will have 1/2 of what he has left behind. And should the sister die childless, his brother shall inherit her. And if the heirs are 2 sisters, they shall have 2/3 of what he has left behind. And if the heirs are sisters and brothers, then male shall have the share of 2 females. The ayah continues. So obviously it's an explicit ayah that talks about the inheritance of kalala. Right? The wordings are difficult, but inshallah, if you go through the ayah, you will understand what I'm trying to say. So this is something which is explicit in Quran. There's no doubt that we have an explicit ruling from Quran about the topic of kalala. And then you have the first caliph, Abu Bakr. When he's been asked about kalala, you know what he answers? This hadith, this quotation is present in which book? Sunan al-Darimi, right? Sunan al-Darimi, Kitab al-Fara'id, Babul Kalala. In volume 2, page 365, it says that عن الشعبي قال سئل أبو بكر عن الكلالة, that Abu Bakr was asked about this issue of inheritance regarding kalala. And then Abu Bakr says, سأقول فيها برأيي, I will give my own opinion on it. فَإِنْ كَانَ صَوَابًا فَمِنَ اللَّهِ. If it's true, then it's from Allah. وَإِنْ كَانَ خَطَأً فَمِنِّي وَمِنَ الشَّيْطَانِ. And if it's a mistake, then it's from me and the shaitan. Now, my question is that if there is an explicit hadith, there's an explicit ayah on the Quran, why you have to use your own personal opinion to tell us the ruling? Why you have to use a personal rule about it? Of course, there is an explicit ayah that tells you what is kalala and what are the rulings regarding it. Why do you have to use your own personal opinion? Perhaps there might be 2 reasons. One is that you want to use your own personal opinion against Quran. Obviously, none of the Sunnis wants to admit it, right? The other way is that you want to say in another way that I don't have knowledge regarding kalala. That's why I might use my own personal opinion. So someone who can see there's an explicit ayah of the Quran regarding this topic of kalala, and he's giving his own personal opinion, perhaps because of his lack of knowledge, perhaps because he doesn't know a lot. Is he the person to be trusted upon compared to someone who is Babu Madinatul Ilm? I'll leave it upon you. Would you trust Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salatu wassalam, or would you trust Abu Bakr when it comes to your legal problems, or when it comes to the masail of the deen? The second example, who was the second caliph? Second caliph was who? Umar ibn al-Khattab. Umar ibn al-Khattab, and this hadith is not mentioned in a regular book. This hadith is mentioned where? In Sahih al-Muslim and different other Sunni books, right? It says that, you know, like, it's so awkward. Imagine what are the main issues that you have to go through. Main issues you have to go through is of wudu and ghusl, right? Imagine if you don't have the water, or if you're running short of time, then if you cannot do wudu or if you cannot do ghusl, what would you do? You would do tayammum. Tayammum is the third form of tahara. Tayammum is the third way that when you apply, then you can pray and you can do the stuff in which wudu or ghusl is wajib. Okay? Tayammum is something which even a basic person would know. What is the masala? If you don't have water, you still have to pray. Okay? You don't have the water, you still have to pray. And how would you pray? You would do tayammum. And how would you do tayammum? Tayammum is easy, just for general knowledge. You strike your hand on the earth, on something in which tayammum is allowed, like this. And after you do this, then you would just like place your hand on your forehead, and you would move it like a little bit on your right, a little bit on your left, and then on the top of your nose, and that's it. That's the way you would brush through your the front part, right? Including everything under this, right? From the place where your hair are growing all the way till the top of your nose. Then you would strike the earth again, and then you would first wipe your right hand like this all the way till the tip of the finger from this area, and then the left hand like this, and this is your tayammum is done, right? This is the normal way you would do tayammum. So even basic person who is going through diniyat, if you ask him that, brother, if you don't have the water, how would you pray? He would say, sir, I would do tayammum and then I'll move forward, I'll pray. But Umar ibn al-Khattab, a person came to him, he says that I have to do ghusl, right? Inni ajanabtu falam ajid al-ma. I have to do ghusl, but I don't have the water. What should I do? Qala Umar, like, see, Qala Umar, la tusalli. That if you don't have the water and you have to do ghusl, ghusl is wajib upon you, in that situation, you don't have to pray. Someone who is the Khalifa of Muslim, he doesn't know about the ruling of tayammum, doesn't know a basic ruling of tayammum. It's something which is so obvious, he doesn't know. And in that mahfil, in that majlis, in that gathering, Ammar was present, Ammar ibn Yasir. He says that, oh Umar, do you remember that me and you were traveling and I had to do ghusl, you had to do ghusl at that time. I floated myself, I wiped myself, my whole body in the mud, and then I prayed and you were the one that didn't pray, etc. And then we came to the Prophet, and Prophet said, Ammar, you could have just done a basic tayammum and that should have been good enough for you. Which means even at that time, Umar ibn al-Khattab was wrong, and they came to the Prophet. Prophet told them a ruling. But in spite of it, Umar ibn al-Khattab, even at that time, even later too, he would say, he would give a decree that you don't have to pray. So imagine where is the level of knowledge of Imam Ali alayhi salatu wassalam, and where is the level of knowledge of the companions and the caliphs that came after him. So I leave it upon the Muslims, I leave it upon the Shias, I leave it upon the Sunnis, I leave it upon everyone that's listening to this lecture to decide who is worthy of more Khilafah. Talut alayhi salatu wassalam was given authority. Why? Because he had more knowledge and he was brave. The knowledge part we covered in this session, and we prove Amir al-Mu'minin alayhi salatu wassalam is matchless. No one can match him, and he's far superior to the caliphs when it came to the knowledge. And we also give an example of Abu Bakr and Umar not knowing the stuff properly. Wa sallallahu ala Muhammad